be open to learn something you didn't know. Don't always think you know everything. The same for me. I'm not going to assume that I know everything about the black culture. I'm Caribbean. I know very little when it comes to the African culture. That openness, that willingness to learn, and don't be dismissive. I appreciate stuff like this because, like I said, growing up as an inner city kid, in all honesty, I experienced very little racism when I was growing up. It's not until I've become an adult and I started to understand sort of the systematic racism that happens, or the closeted racism that happens, that I've started to have my eyes open to it all. So I think not only do other cultures need to understand black people, I think black people have a lot of learning to do as well.
Be willing to educate yourself and be willing to be understanding, and don't ignore it. If you feel like you're going to say something wrong, just ask, and don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to learn. But also understand that you're coming from a place of inexperience. It's not your experience. It's not something that really you can have an opinion on. Therefore, you have to sit back and learn and be understanding.
Once you've now gotten to the point of educating yourself, education never ever stops, but once you have gotten to a point of educating yourself, go and have those same conversations with your white people and check your other white friends for their privilege as well. Because after a while, I'm going to get tired of these conversations, and I don't want to have these conversations with every single white person. If I've taught 5 white people, you 5 white people go teach another 5 white people each, and just keep on going. After a while, it becomes a case of, as long as the message doesn't get diluted, people then start to understand just how privileged they are as white people.
Educate yourself on, don't be ignorant, but also if you have a question, ask it. And if you have good intentions, the person's not going to be offended.
If I was to give advice, is that, to educate yourself, to have conversations, and to not be afraid. As humans, we are more united and we have more similarities than we actually realise.
My advice would be enjoy the friendship, learn as much as you can. Do not almost pre-assess, I don't know if that's a word, but don't assume you know, because 9 times out of 10 you don't know. Even to me, I'm a mixed race person. There's even times where I don't know, so I'm telling you there's times where you don't know.
I'd say don't act like you know anything. Do you know what I mean? You don't. You honestly don't. I could say maybe, okay, little bits, but if you're ignorant enough to think that you've read a newspaper or some shit and you have any idea about what's going on, you fucking don't. You could even spend the next 6 hours talking to people from all over the world and you still wouldn't have a clue because you haven't lived it, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't try to learn, and every day, and even experiences like this and bits, you know what I mean? Take those opportunities and just don't be scared to embarrass yourself as well. I mean, I've had chats at work in rooms which are majority black, and I have felt uncomfortable, but they have put me in a position where they're like, it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Just go for it and say this. And it's still not easy, and it's that fear that gets built up on the other side as well, you know what I mean? Because if you genuinely see yourself as a nice person and you do want to be friends with everyone, you are so fucking scared of offending anyone that you are scared to actually talk. It's if we don't do that, what's the fucking point, man? Do you know what I mean? How are we gonna get anything done? I would rather make a mistake and know that you're not gonna go back and cry or have a horrible time. You're actually gonna just tell me to my face, but in a nice way, and say, whoa, that was wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like Becky did back then. She hadn't told me that, I'd still be going around work saying that. That would be a bad day, do you know what I mean? But she caught me at the right time, and I'll be grateful for that. But just talk to people, man. Talk to the person you sat next to on the bus. That's what I'd say. Especially in London, motherfucker. You learn some crazy shit.
Be open to listening to them and just understand that they have come from a different upbringing, entirely different upbringing to what you may have had. You may have been neighbours, but what goes on in their house and what goes in your house is entirely different. And there's beauty in difference. And you can learn so much about talking to this brown person and understanding their culture and their heritage and the way they've lived their life, and vice versa. They will learn so much from you. And it's just, there should be a lot of love and compassion and a lot of understanding and just listening, truly listening and taking on board and experiencing as well. If you want to try something or if you want to take part in something, just ask. and they will hopefully kind of like take you in and say like, oh, this is the kind of food that we eat, this is the kind of things that we're into and whatnot as like a family and whatnot, and vice versa. You will broaden their experiences so much as well.
That's amazing. So you said there's beauty in difference. Don't be afraid to ask. Go and eat their food and get involved with their culture,
Definitely.
lifestyle. Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid, yeah, and don't let any barriers sort of get in the way. Just stretch your hand out, shake their hand, and just want to actually learn and understand and listen.
I think I would just say like listen, because I think, say if your friend is like explaining that, oh, like did you see it that way that person looked at me or whatever, and I think if you dismiss it, like I think just take into account that your experiences are different, and I think sometimes like say if I'm with my white friends, like, I'll notice a lot, but I won't say it because I feel like there's no need to say it, but I've taken it into account. Because sometimes they might just not get it, and I think if you negate that, oh, like no, they wasn't looking at you like that or whatever, then I think then they won't want to share it with you.
So you're saying there's times where you're not saying stuff to your white friends, even though something's happened that's bothered you.
Yeah.
Because you know they won't understand.
Yeah.
Dear white people, listen to your black friends, listen to their pain, listen to their struggles.
I remember one of the relationships I used to be in, for example, I used to say, I feel this, and the person would respond, you don't need to feel like that, that's ridiculous. But that's a feeling, that's how someone's feeling. So if a black person goes to a white person and says, I feel this because of this, don't say, that's ridiculous, you don't need to feel like that, because that person's feeling like that for a reason. Whatever reason that is, you may not understand, that's their reason. Be open to hearing that reason. A lot of the time, black people aren't asking for you to give the answer. We're just asking you to hear. So that's what my advice would be to anybody being friends with a black person, is just be open to hear, just listen. Don't always feel like you need to answer or defend or respond, just listen.
In the nicest way possible, like you just have to just shut up and let your friends speak, and don't argue and don't try and force your opinion, because I think that a lot of the time, and what I've noticed a lot about since the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of people have opinions, and a lot of their opinions are irrelevant, because as rude as it sounds, it's like you haven't experienced it, so you can't tell me my experience. And I think a lot of time, I've had some conversations with some very ignorant people that have opinions, but but their opinion isn't based on anything other than what they think, but they haven't experienced it. And I think that it can be difficult to be friends with someone that has opinions where it's not really based on anything, whereas for me or for other people, it's actually our experience.
And I'd also say, don't be afraid to ask questions. And I think it's just the way you say it, because I think sometimes people, a lot of the time, black people want to share. And for example, even things about hair and stuff, I think it's we're very happy to tell you, and if you've got questions, but I think sometimes if people can just, they go about it, I guess, maybe the wrong way. And I think lots of people obviously have questions about different things and different cultures, and I think it's just the way you go about doing it. But I think the wrong way can also be if you're asking a question but inferring that your way is the right way. For example, if you said, it's very common to be oh, why, I don't know, maybe ignorant questions, for example, why is your palm white?
Why is your palm white?
Yeah, why is your palm white?
Yeah.
And it's not black, questions like that where I'm well, I don't know. Yeah.
Don't ask stupid questions.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, but make sure that when you're asking the question, you're not inferring that the white way is that's how everyone should be made. Or say if she was oh, well, why is your hair not straight? And I think it's well, that's inferring that the straight way is the right way.